Over the course of the last couple of years, it's become more and more popular for states to float the idea of either outright banning all trail cameras or cell cameras on public grounds. Most recently, this is brought up in Louisiana, which is the subject of today's Q&A episode. I wanted to caveat the conversation you're about to hear with a couple days ago when we recorded this proposal was still up in the air. Since then, it was shot down, so Louisiana is not banning trail cameras on WMAs for the 2025-2026 season. So they didn't go through with it. But it's still an interesting discussion, and it's something that's, like I said, getting more popular. So we're probably going to see it come up in a couple more states. So when it does come up in other states, we'll continue to cover it right here on the Southern Outdoorsmen Podcast. All right, welcome back, everybody. If you're a longtime listener, you probably noticed that we changed up our intro a little bit. It's a little bit different now, trying something new. Also, no headsets. So this is kind of interesting. It's got Jacob a little bit thrown off. I'm going to warn you. Jacob, how are you?
Not great.
You coping well with
No, I'm not doing good with it.
We had to start over. He's doing so bad, we had to start this podcast over, and now we're doing it a second time. But like I said, this is a Q&A edition. We do these every single Thursday, so we're going to hit 3 Q&A submissions today. And then also later, I went to the Conservation Advisory Board meeting here in Alabama last week, and we're going to talk about that and everything that was discussed there. It got pretty heated. There was people screaming, screaming in that room. So that was kind of interesting. We're going to talk about that a little bit. Where can people do the Q&As?
Yeah, so down in the show notes in the video description below, there's a link to our website where you can submit your video Q&A, film it on your phone, submit it. Again, we're getting to turkey season, so if you have some turkey questions, please send those in. Also, we've been getting some habitat management questions as well, and they've been going pretty well. So again, if you have any questions, submit them down below in the link, and we'll get kicked on over to our very first Q&A today, talking about, again, trail camera bans in the Southeast.
All right, yeah, this is from Eric from Louisiana.
All right, guys, I got one for you. Love the show. Hunted a new piece of public land to me in South Louisiana this year. Only had a chance to get out there a few times, but I was trying to employ a strategy that you guys have talked about several times this year. Located a couple of good bucks. One that I was really interested in. He's pretty young. He had broken off his entire right side just above the brow tine early in the season. First had him on camera in early November. Last had him mid-February, right before the close of the season, so I'm pretty sure he made it. I was doing pretty good walking him back with the trail cameras, like you guys have talked about in several episodes. Unfortunately, just kind of ran out of season. And it looks like Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, in their notice of intent, is going to ban all cameras on WMAs starting next year. So, question and or opinion from you guys. Just wanted to know, I got starting to build a little history with a cool deer, except it looks like trail cameras are going to be out of the equation. So, pretty sure I know how I'm going to tackle it next year, but just wanted to hear y'all's opinion and see what you thought. Hopefully this is not a trend that continues beyond Louisiana, but looks like we're going to be no cameras on WMAs next year. Also, for you Alabama guys, go Tigers.
All right, what's your take on that?
I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, the thing about trail cameras, it's a love-hate relationship with majority of people on the internet. Personally, we really like trail cameras. It's one of those things that you can use as a tool where you can actually go out there and have other sets of eyes in areas that maybe are a little more remote to get to, and also keep tabs on what's going on from an annual pattern standpoint to build history in an area in order to have success. And it goes directly back to episode 584 with Daniel Williams, who we had on the podcast back last May. And he talked about using trail cameras specifically to build annual patterns, but also how he was able to do it without trail cameras before. Now, what I really feel bad about guys in Louisiana in this circumstance that are hunting public land is the ones who do not have a lot of time to hunt. They don't have a lot of time to spend in the woods. They work a 9 to 5. They have a family. They may hunt 1 to maybe at the most 2 days a week, or sometimes every other week they may have an opportunity to go hunt for a day. And trail cameras can be very valuable for those individuals who are going out there just to, again, like I said, keep tabs on what's happening and maybe what areas they should focus on a little bit more than others. And also I feel bad for the guys that are hunting specific deer. Now, I've never killed a deer that we've had on trail camera that I remember, that I recall, or a buck specifically. And so there is a skill set you can learn to be able to hunt without using trail cameras. But again, this is hurting the guys who, maybe aren't as familiar with the woods they're hunting in, and also just don't have a lot of time to go hunt. So it's really a double whammy for those guys, unfortunately.
Yeah, I did a little bit of research trying to figure out where this came from, and I could not find really anything other than the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, I think is what it's called. They had a meeting on, I think, sometime in early February, where they added this to their agenda, where I think it's still just a proposal, so I don't think it's set in stone yet. But they are. It sounds like they're going to pass it. At least that's what I'm seeing online. And I couldn't really find a statement from them about where this came from, except for I found a forum post where people were talking about it, and one guy said that they listed one of their reasons as hunter conflicts, or hunters trying to claim areas with trail cameras. I never found the actual statement from the state of Louisiana about that, but that was just something I saw on the internet, so who knows if that's true or not. But I would be curious, what even brought this about in Louisiana? Because one point that I'll make is I think that this is something that kind of started out west. Was it Arizona?
Arizona was the first, and then Kansas was the second.
So Arizona, I think people had issues with elk wallows and stuff.
Watering holes, yeah.
Watering holes where, there would be a bunch of trail cameras on it, and people would have conflicts. And my only point I don't live out there, so I don't want to say whether or not I support or don't support them banning it out there in that part of the country. But all I'm going to say is I can see why out there it would make sense if it's on public ground. And when we were in Kansas this past year, there's only a certain amount of woods out there. It's not like here in the southeast where there's literally everything is covered. It's out there in Kansas, there's wood blocks. And everything is wide open prairie, and then there's wood blocks. So obviously people are going to congregate there. So there's a lot of potential for conflict. And we've talked to buddies who are in other parts of the country who have been you can't go find a scrape that doesn't have a camera on it on public. It's not like that where we're at. Personally, I don't have that problem at all, and I hunt all over the state of Alabama, and I put cameras out. Maybe I'm the guy. Maybe other people walk into spots and they're like, crap, there's a camera
but
here.
we're not claiming areas with trail cameras.
Well, yeah.
And there's a very, very, very small majority or minority of people who is that kind of individual, who they think because they have a tree stand there, they have a trail camera there, it is their spot, it is their area, but they're on public land, which is available to everybody. And that's not the right mindset. If that's your mindset, you need to go buy some land, you need to get in a lease, you need to get in a hunting club, something like that, to kind of claim your own little spot. But if you're on public land, everybody has access to that, has a hunting license that's legal to be there. So it's unfortunate that people like that are causing issues for guys who are doing it the right way with trail cameras. But again, there is the internet split on trail cameras. There is people who are very pro trail camera from an aspect of they want to shoot older age deer, they want to hunt specific bucks, and they really like trail cameras for that application. And there's the other sect of people who despise trail cameras because they feel it's a way of either cheating or a way to get to the top a lot faster from a hunter harvest standpoint. Compared to just true woodsmanship and hunting based off sign and putting time in the woods. But again, to me, the guys that get screwed in this circumstance, if this does get passed, is the guys who do not have a lot of opportunity to go out there and hunt for very many days, specifically in a row, without taking off, PTO time, if they have time off work, paid time off work in order to go and hunt. So it's really hurting those individuals who, again, can only hunt 1 day a week, maybe 2 days a week, or once every other week. So that is very unfortunate with that circumstance. But it's one of those things that this is why you need to be vocal in your state, whether you're pro or against something. And whether it's, which we're going to talk about today, like the Alabama Conservation Advisory Board meeting, the CAB meeting that was just had in the state this past week, or any other either online public, I don't know what they call them.
Like public comment period?
Yeah, public commentary periods, whether it's online or in person, to why it's important to get involved. Because the thing is, if you don't go and present your argument against something that you think is maybe not the right thing the state should do, you really don't have a voice in it at that point. Because if there's more people there that are opposing something, or is in not opposing, but maybe they're for some kind of ban, the ones that are against it, if you don't show up and let your voice be heard, you can cry on social media all the time, or on podcasts like this, and you got no leg to stand on because you weren't present for these actual meetings. And that's the big aspect. Like, you got to get a lot more active and stuff like this, and especially when it comes to like bag limit changes, season changes, less opportunity when it comes to public land and potentially public lands getting sold off. That's a big reason why you got to be vocal and again kind of get to some of these meetings and get a group of people to come to some of these meetings as well. And I guess Louisiana has to have something like that. They have to have some kind of public period where they're presenting these things, kind of like we have here in Alabama.
Yeah, I don't know what it would be, but I don't get it because, like, again, going back to the whole Kansas example, is like I can see where hunters get concentrated out there, where you have thousands and thousands of acres, but there's only certain areas where people would congregate to hunt, but really congregate to put trail cameras, because most people aren't, sticking a piece of, I don't know, like rebar in the ground and strapping a camera to it out in the field. They're putting them in the timber block. So I can see where people are getting concentrated and it produces the conditions where a conflict might happen. My thing is, in Louisiana, it's like thick woods, everywhere is cover, people are more spread out. I just don't, like, what is the case that provoked this? That's what I'm curious about. I'd be curious if there was like some hunter conflict that brought this to the forefront. I haven't heard of anything, but yeah, that's a bummer.
Well, other than the forum, but like, it might have been deer hunters, but like, I've heard of waterfowl hunters doing this on public land, where they'll go find a hole that ducks are using a whole bunch, put a camera on it, and try to use it as a way to claim their spot and give them a reason to walk in there and hunt, or drive their boat in there and go hunt when someone else might already be there. And again, you see the same thing with trail cameras as you do with tree stands. Some guys will put tree stands on a piece of public. Especially climbers, they'll leave a climber in an area, not have a backup plan. You're in there. This has happened to us. You're in there hunting. You're in there an hour before daylight, hour and a half before daylight, set up on a gun hunt. And all of a sudden, a dude 30 minutes before daylight comes walking in, and you go to talk to him. He's like, "Well, I'm hunting here because I already have a stand here. This is where I'm going to go hunt." Blah blah blah. And they're not courteous enough to have other backup opportunities because they either haven't scouted or they don't understand, especially on public land, this common courtesy and etiquette of how you should go about hunting that stuff. And again, if someone's already there, they beat you to the spot, man, go to a backup spot, and so on.
Yeah.
That's one thing. Now, every state's a little bit different, but here in Alabama, we're kind of blessed with, on a decent amount of our public, is there big enough tracks that if you can scout a few different areas, if there's somebody right here and there's like, you're not hunting, like, especially if you're going to especially terrain features. If you're going to like a terrain feature or a very common habitat edge that a lot of other guys are going to be going to, if you pull it to a spot, you look at the map, there's probably a good chance there's someone else in that area, unless you're hunting like something that's kind of more overlooked. Well, then you just go to another spot. You just kind of roll out. I do feel bad for the guys that are in areas where it's a lot. The public land is not as abundant, or they're a lot smaller pieces, and it's kind of like, just because you're there first, like, it's the only access on 2,000 acres, so everybody's got to walk in that way. Well, if you hunt, 500 yards from the truck, right off the access route, you're going to have people walk in on you. You're going to have conflict. So there's a lot of issues there. But yeah, it was probably something like that. It was either some deer hunters, kind of greedy deer hunters on public land, or probably waterfowlers.
Probably waterfowlers. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. There seems to be more conflicts around waterfowl than anything else.
Look, people get crazy for shooting some birds.
Yep.
I mean, get crazy.
Yes,
full-blown fist fights. The amount of duck hunters I've talked to who maybe don't duck hunt as much anymore, and like one of my old neighbors, he was like this. He's like, dude, I've been in more fist fights in Arkansas on public land duck hunting because we were at a hole and some other guys came in there and full blown in chest waders fist fighting in the water, or like jumping between boats. Like, I mean, like your Jack Sparrow and Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh my god!
So he's like, I'm done with it. He's like, I don't care anything about doing it anymore on public land. He's like, I'll go hunt a lease or go pay a guide to go hunt some places to keep from that happening. But he's like, it would happen all the time. So waterfowlers, y'all get a little fired up for some birds. Again, don't have a super long season, and it's unfortunate too.
Yeah, I don't know. Alabama banned, I think it's cell cameras. Was it cell cameras last year on WMAs in turkey season?
Cell cameras or trail cameras. But yeah, it was like you had to have them out by like mid-March on WMAs to keep from getting a ticket or whatever. And I think
it was just cell cameras.
And the funny thing is, I think they made that announcement. They had it in the rule book somewhere, but of course nobody reads like the full rule book. It's more about like season dates, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then they made a post like, I think it was 2 days before it was going to be enacted, as in like when like the ban took place.
Yeah.
It was in March, and people were like losing their minds, like, what is going on? Blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, had to run out and go pull some cameras.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see if the trend continues, but it's something that's getting discussed a lot more. So, Louisiana folks, if you don't like it, contact your state agency about it. Go to the meetings if y'all have them. I'm sure that you do. There's definitely got to be some kind of public commentary. Mm-hmm. So if you don't like it, or if you do like it, contact them the same way. I mean, go and voice your support for it or voice your opposition for it. One thing I'll say, kind of jumping ahead a little bit, is going to the Conservation Advisory Board meeting here in Alabama. The turnout on those is just abysmal. It's not good. I don't think it was good when you went last year.
No.
It definitely wasn't good when I went. They had like 24 speakers, and that was probably more than half of the room. Mm-hmm. And it's just like not very many people are showing up to those. So anyways, we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But let us know what y'all think about that in the comments. Let us know. If anybody knows kind of what this stems from in Louisiana, I'd be very curious. So please write in, leave a comment, or email us about it, because I want to know where it came from.
Yep.
So, all right. Anyways, let's move on to the next one. Now we're going to go with Aaron from Michigan.
Hey guys, Aaron from beautiful northern Lower Michigan. Kind of a two-part. I've got a listener success and a question. First, I just want to say I really appreciate you guys' work and effort. All the content that you guys have really does translate well for me in the north, and it's helped me out a lot. The past year and a half, I just really wanted to figure out the public land around my area. I've always hunted private land my whole life, and I didn't want to burn out my stands anymore, just hunting the same ones on private. So I've really tried to branch out and figure out the public land stuff, and I really wanted to shoot a good buck. My goal was a Pulp and Young class buck, and I found two, put the info together, and I was able to harvest both of my target bucks, which I hope I can do it again, but I don't know if I'll ever be able to do it again. But the first one was this 136 and change 12 point, and then 131 and change 12 point. I had 3 years of history with this one, and I know I had a picture of him the year before as a 10 point. But really great story with those, but maybe I'll get to share sometime. But thanks for that. Your guys' info really helped in that. So my question is, early season, preseason, summertime, I like to find a buck that I want to target. Not that I will only shoot that buck, but at least I have confidence that one's in the area. So most of the public land that I hunt there's not any ag. You can't go in glass. It's mostly wooded, mixture of oak, pine, some swamps. But there isn't really where you could go and drive around in glass to get eyes on one very efficiently. So that's why I rely on trail cameras. Trail cam strategy. Say you'd had 5 cameras and you're going to work a couple 100-acre piece of state land. How far are you spreading those trail cams out? And then how far do you think you need to bounce them? Say you go and leave them a week, 2 weeks, and then you go in and shift them, trying to locate a buck that you would like to go after. Do you have a technique? Do you have like a certain distance, like you try to move them, 200 yards, a half mile? I think that's one of the biggest keys, is just finding a buck, and then from there, obviously you got to bounce them throughout the season as they change, but at least you have an area to focus on. So I'm just wondering if you or any of your guests have talked about any type of strategy as far as shifting cameras and breaking down an area. Thanks, guys.
All right, Aaron, appreciate the kind words from Michigan. Glad to see that the stuff's working up in Michigan, too, from the show. So You need to listen to episode 512 with Josh Driver. It's a classic episode that we did like years and years ago. I don't even remember what year that was now, but originally it was episode 141, and we're on episode like 670 or something now. Mm-hmm. So it's way back in the archive. But Josh is a hunter from Kentucky, and he killed a bunch of really big deer in Kentucky and Tennessee, and he uses trail cameras really efficiently. And he described it like, I think, casting a net around a buck, where he would spread his trail cameras out over a piece of public, and then once he located a buck, he would congregate all the trail cameras on that buck and try to figure out where that deer is. So I will go listen to that. I'll link it down in the show notes so you can go and watch that video. It was originally episode 141. We reposted it episode 512 like 2 years ago.
It's on YouTube.
So it's on YouTube now. But I would definitely watch that one. That's a really, really good one for that. And that's something that I've tried to implement personally, especially this season. Now, I did it a little bit different than what Josh did, because these were in areas that either I don't hunt yet, or I don't hunt them a lot yet. I'm still trying to figure them out. Like, I'm hunting areas that I've got a lot of history with right now, but I'm trying to expand out. So I went to these new pieces of public land, and I took like 5 or 6 cameras to each of them, and I placed them, and I left them all season. So I didn't do the thing where I went out there, checked them, moved them, checked them, moved them. I just went in and kind of scattered them throughout an area and then let them soak. My personal view on this, again, go listen to Josh, because Josh is a lot better deer hunter than I am, frankly. But my view on this, what I'm trying to do with it, is I just go in there and I let the sign kind of dictate what I put the cameras on. So, for instance, and there's 2 areas I did this year. One of the areas, my cameras, I had like 7 cameras, and they were all on one ridge system. And the furthest distance between the 2 furthest distances between cameras was maybe like probably 3/4 of a mile. And there's a whole bunch of cameras in between there. So I just covered one ridge really, really good, because I'm going to hunt that ridge next year, and I wanted to figure out what was going on when the bucks were getting on that ridge, when they were coming off the ridge. And then on the other area, it's a lot more spread out. So the other piece of public I went to, the average distance between cameras is probably half a mile, and the furthest distance between 2 of them is definitely over like a mile and a half as the crow flies. So 2 different approaches, but it's just dictated by what kind of sign I found there and how dense that sign was. So what's your take?
I mean, I don't run, you run majority of our trail cameras. The guys who I know who are extremely successful trail cameras, which is interesting because we're getting this conversation after talking about trail camera band, is the guys who kind of cast that net, like Josh Driver. I think Shane Parker the same way. Daniel Williams a little bit, but he likes to spread his out a lot more. But one thing you didn't really talk about is intervals of like if or when you actually move cameras. Okay,
right.
Josh would move cameras a lot because his goal was try to kill one opening week to first couple weeks of Kentucky's opener,
right,
which is in September. And he would try to get his buck killed super early and then, be done for the year in Kentucky and then try to figure something out for another state. I think that can work extremely well. The thing is, and Josh really talks about that in episode 512, is his strategy of finding kind of buck core areas based off habitat and terrain. Like, what does a buck need? He needs food, water, and cover, and he needs it super close by. He doesn't want to travel a huge distance, especially maybe for if you're in ag country, maybe there's a crop field half a mile away, but he needs to have browse right there around where he's bedding at, and then also having water fairly close by, and using that combination and also habitat edges, he'd find where these bucks would be at, and then move the cameras in to figure out where they're going from that location. And I think that's extremely effective for early season. I think what gets some guys maybe screwed up, because I've done this in the past, we've all done it in the past, is moving cameras too frequently during season, because you could have an area that you might not get a buck on camera in September and October, but come November and December, they are stacked in there. And it's because there's does in there, and it's a hot spot that these bucks are shifting into, and they're laying a lot more sign down and so on. And I feel like that's where you really want to have some camera soaking. Is like, if you're finding does on camera early season, if you have enough cameras, it might be worth leaving some of those cameras in there, especially if they're on really good habitat edges, travel corridors, old historical sign. Like Daniel Williams told a story in episode, I think it was 584, but also when we did the Pablo episode at the end of the year of 2024, they talked about this a little bit more, where they found a big historical rub and they put a camera on it, and they would have this batch group of bucks come through there during a certain week period of time during daylight and just spending time around the rub, not even hitting the rub, just spending time around it. And they were able to go back in there, and actually, I think Daniel actually killed one of his bucks in that spot this past season. And I think that's where, if you move your cameras too much, especially in areas with like medium to low deer density, when I say medium low deer density, like 12, 15 deer per square mile or less, I think it's actually a detriment to you, is moving them too much. Like, find the historical sign, really good travel corridors with habitat edges, and good cover close by. And especially if you're on does, you're going to have bucks at some point of the season. And that's the advantage of letting cameras soak and taking a Michael Perry approach, where he finds those areas, he leaves a camera there all year and does not check it, does not move that camera, because he's using that data for the next season. Now, I think that's a very effective way in low to medium deer density areas.
Yeah, and that's a good point, too, because the guy like Daniel Williams and Michael Perry that you just mentioned, they use a similar tactic, and they both are hunting in very low deer density areas. Whereas guys who, like Shane, would move cameras a lot more, but he came from a higher deer density area, and Josh Driver also came from a higher deer density area. So it's two different approaches. And yeah, I would listen to both of those. Like, I guess in a nutshell, the Josh Driver approach would be you're moving your cameras a lot and you're trying to locate the deer and go hunt him right then. Whereas the Daniel Williams approach would be you are letting those cameras soak and you're trying to get annual data. So it's two different approaches. I tend to do the Daniel Williams one, frankly, because I'm too lazy to go move my cameras all the time. And I don't like going into my area that much.
Well, especially, and also if your public land's 30 minutes from the house, it's one thing. If your public land's an hour or more from the house, it makes it even tougher to get the time. And then also, if you're having to hike in or get into a spot in order to get the cameras, it's a little more difficult to move cameras around without being super invasive and also taking up a ton of your time. Again, if you have family, full-time job, all that kind of stuff, it makes it a little more complicated versus finding good historical areas and letting cameras soak, and then having a handful of cameras that you'll move around, those cameras that you have soaking all season. So again, I don't think there's a wrong way to do it, but you need to figure out in your area, based off how many deer you have. Again, if it's like super high deer density area, which I doubt, based off like what he was saying, it's probably not as high as maybe a little bit more southern Michigan, where there's, again, a lot more deer and there's also a lot more hunters too and a lot more agriculture. But is letting some of those cameras soak and then trying to annualize or pick out the annual patterns of when bucks are moving through an area and really try to locate your doe groups. Like, especially if you're a rut hunter. Now, kill one early season. Again, Josh Driver's your guy. If you want to kill one during the rut, Daniel Williams and Michael Perry would be two great guys to really listen to and really take notes on what they're explaining, because their strategy is very much finding the travel corridors that these bucks are using and also finding doe groups that are using those travel corridors. And again, if you can find that, you have a really good option to build history in a location and also be able to set up for more success by doing that. So again, great question. It's just, I would analyze your deer density there. How does the habitat set up? Like, again, is it very flat and there's not super great pinch points, or do you have some rolling topography and terrain and set up accordingly? By the way, I got to tell you something after the podcast about terrain that's really funny. Oh, okay. Not saying on the podcast.
Oh, no.
But it's after the podcast.
Now I'm curious.
Yeah, very funny.
I have some guesses as to what.
I guarantee you won't guess this.
Man, you go tease the listeners like
guarantee it has to do with that date I went on. It's pretty funny. Anyway.
Okay.
Same for the Patreon members. Go join Patreon, patreon.com/the Southern Outdoorsmen for our meetings. We'll discuss it there too. It's hilarious.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm looking forward to this.
She brought it up, actually.
Okay. All right. Now I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
Not sure where this is going to go.
Oh, it's great. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, if you do that and have that approach, I think you're going to have a lot more success with cameras. And also, it's one of those things that, we really like cell cameras. Like, we've had a lot of success with those Moultrie mobile cameras. But if you can't afford like multiple cell cameras, just find the cheapest option that will work for you in your area and just run some. Because again, you're going to learn more by doing that, especially if you just don't have a lot of time to hunt. Because I almost say it's unfortunate when we get a guy on who hunts a ton, like because of their job career or they're retired, they have a ton of time to hunt, has absolute tons of woodsmanship, and maybe they don't run a ton of cameras. They have a certain perspective and outlook than the average guy who doesn't have that much time to go spend out there. Mm-hmm. So like you have to take that with a grain of salt, that like they're learning a lot because they're spending a ton of time in the woods. And again, that should be a goal for all of us. But if we can't do it because of work and family, that's where the trail cameras really come to, be a tool for success and for us to really learn an area. So, I'd pay attention to that.
So it might be the off season, but we're still always thinking about whitetails. And if you're looking to get more mobile this fall and you're looking at saddle setups, the two most common designs you're going to see are a single panel design or a double panel design. They both have their advantages and disadvantages. A single panel design is going to be more comfortable right out of the box, while a double panel design is going to be much more adjustable and customizable to your fit. We always say on the podcast, saddles are kind of like boots. Different people are going to like different things. As a general rule of thumb, I found that heavier set guys typically like a single panel more than they like a double panel. But other than that, it's just really a matter of preference. I personally use both of these saddles. This is the Method 2 from Latitude, and this is the Lone Star from Latitude. I will say that the Method 2 is really nice because it's a two-panel design. It's almost like you have a built-in back band that'll take a little bit of pressure off your back when you're sitting down. But if you're just getting into saddle hunting and you want something that's extremely comfortable right out of the box, the Lone Star is going to be your go-to. It has an advanced hip pinch reduction system in it, so right out of the box, this is going to be very comfortable, and you're not going to have the hip pinch issues that a lot of people have when they first get into saddle hunting. So if you want to be more mobile this fall, check out latitudeoutdoors.com to see these two saddles and a bunch of other mobile hunting gear. We've enjoyed them a lot, and I think you're going to enjoy them too.
Hey guys, it's Jake from the podcast. Got a quick tip for you when it comes to turkey calling, especially if you're a newer turkey hunter that's not as experienced, and that is using covert calling that we learned from Coach Ron Waters last year out of Alabama. And that's what helped us kill 9 birds in Alabama between 3 of us. And again, a lot of those on public land. You don't have to be a great caller like I mentioned, and all it is super soft calling at like a 20 to 30, maybe 40% volume level when it comes to calling. I really like a friction call to do that, doing soft clucks, purrs, and yelps. So working that in along with scratching the leaves worked extremely well for me last year, along with my brother Thomas and then even Andrew. So again, covert calling can really work for you. It's also nice to have a call that you have a lot of control over, especially at lower volume levels. And that's where the Dixie Hen custom ceramic pot call from Houndstooth Game Calls really works out great for me. I love this call. Again, it helped me kill 8 birds in Alabama, or be part of 8 birds dying in Alabama, 4 from me and 4 from Thomas. Then Andrew also killed one using the Dixie Hen custom ceramic. If you want to check it out, go to houndstoothgamecalls.com and use the code Southern25 for a discount on your order. Really love these calls, guys. I think you'll enjoy it too this spring.
All right, so I mentioned it earlier this week. I went to the Conservation Advisory Board meeting in Montgomery, Alabama. Conservation Advisory Board here in Alabama, they're the ones who set our seasons, our bag limits, like just game regulations, things of that nature. And the board meeting is your opportunity to go and state your opinion on whatever you think ought to be changed. So this is the first one I went to. It was pretty interesting, to say the least.
How many listeners did you run into?
2. There's 2.
Okay.
There's probably, again, counting people who spoke and addressed the board, there was like maybe 40 people. I mean, it's like you look around. There was a lot of people in the room, but when you got to looking around, it was like a bunch of game wardens. There's a lot of state people. Yeah, like a bunch of game wardens and state officials and stuff like that. But the actual audience members, I mean, there might have been like 35.
Yeah,
maybe 40.
Yeah,
not very many people showed up at all, which is kind of discouraging. The next one is May 10th in Troy, by the way. So if you are interested in going, it is May 10th in Troy, Alabama. Down there in the Wiregrass. So y'all mark your calendars to be at that one. We're going to try to go to that one as well. But anyways, as far as changes for Alabama season, Chuck Sykes, our director of wildlife and freshwater fisheries, got up there, and he said that his department is recommending an increase in the daily bag limit of does from 1 to 2. So that's just a proposal. It's not law yet, but they're proposing basically being able to shoot 2 does a day, which I think you were able to do when I was a kid. And then they changed it when I was a kid to 1 doe a day. But so, yeah, increasing the daily bag limit on does, which is great. I'm all for that. So thank you, Mr. Chuck Sykes. I like that a lot.
Why is that great?
Because I think that most people in the state would like to do that. And frankly, I think that our deer herd can more than support that. And also, it's going to give property owners more leeway to manage their property how they want. Because most of the guys that we know who are seriously managing their properties for whitetails can't kill enough does. Mm-hmm. Like, they just cannot kill enough does. They have people coming out. So allowing them to shoot 2 does a day is going to help them out a ton. And if you don't want to shoot 2 does a day, you don't have to. But I'm all about giving that decision to the hunter or the landowner. So I think that's a big step in the right direction. Now, there was one lady that got up there. This was pretty surprising to me. I think she was from Barber County, and she was talking about how their deer population is down and that they ought to limit it to 3 does per season. And I was like, Barber County? Like, that's kind of surprising. That's a pretty high deer density part of the state. So I don't know, but she got up there and, was able to say her piece. But I'm like, for her, if maybe her little complex of properties right there, she talked about her and her neighbors not having a good year. They can just self-limit their doe harvest. Yeah. That doesn't mean, put it out for the whole state or anything, or the whole county or whatever. Because I know for a fact there's parts of Barber County that could, like, they don't need to be shooting 3 does a year. Yeah. So anyways, I think that's a big step in that.
And the reason why you'd want to shoot does if you're managing for trophy bucks specifically is the limit or cap or try to cap the mouths you have to feed on the landscape, so more native browse and food can go towards the buck herd, and also gives you a lot better rutting opportunity as well to actually see more rutting because it makes it much more defined. And again, we've had biologists on the podcast talk about this. It makes the rut much more defined. It's not so drawn out because does are kind of coming into heat at a little bit different time periods, or potentially if they don't all get bred, they come back in a little bit later, so it makes the rut drawn out, and also it limits how much the bucks, especially the mature bucks, have to travel in order and compete in order to get a doe, because there's so many does in the landscape, and we have some public land that we hunt that's got unbelievable doe numbers, like to the point it's
kind of obnoxious.
It's obnoxious, and even the guys I know who's hunted there for 20 plus years are like, dude, the rut activity is god awful. Like, you'll still see some. You'll see some chasing. You'll see some fighting, all that kind of stuff. But it's not like it used to be when the herd number is way lower. And again, there was less does per buck ratio. Again, the ideal ratio is 1 to 2 bucks. Or, I'm sorry, 1 to 1 is what some managers say. 1 buck to 1 doe. Some will say upwards of 1 to 2 does. 1 buck to 2 does is a pretty good ratio. But you start getting some of these areas where it's potentially 3 to 6 or even higher does to bucks. It'll make it really tough where you just don't have great rutting activity. And that's where I think a lot of guys in the state of Alabama say, man, I saw no rutting activity this year. It was terrible. I didn't see anything on the camera, all this kind of stuff. Of course, you could be in the wrong spot on your property camera wise, but also could be that you have so many does out there the bucks aren't competing, they're not rutting, they're rutting, but they're not chasing really hard, and it makes it where you don't visually get to see it, which is unfortunate because I've heard that from a lot of Alabama deer hunters. So that's what taking a little bit more does off the landscape can help you with, and still keep a nice healthy herd to justify doing so. So I don't know. I mean, I'm all for that. I mean, to be honest, I hope if Chuck gets that passed, that will also open up on public land opportunities as well. Because there's some public land that we hunt. They have one. Now you can shoot a doe during bow season, but to be 100% honest, they have there's way lower bow success and way less people that bow hunt than gun hunt. Yeah. But on some of these gun hunts, on some of these WMAs in Alabama, they may have 1, maybe 2 hunts the whole year during firearm season that you can actually shoot a doe. And a lot of guys do. A lot of guys is their one opportunity a year to be able to hunt that piece of public land and get a doe. That's when they're going to do it. But if they had more opportunities for more gun hunts to be able to shoot does on it, I think that'd be a good thing as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And again, some people might be like, y'all are terrible. Oh my God. What are you doing? Like, no, you're going to screw up everything. You don't have does, you don't have bucks. I get that. But, good luck trying to kill all the deer. I mean, they're already trying to do it in the CWD zone. I don't think it's working for them.
Yeah, there's one guy that got up there and talked about CWD. Another thing that Chuck mentioned is there's going to be some minor date adjustments to seasons, but they're all calendar related, so they're not like, I don't think they're getting rid of any days in deer or turkey or any other seasons, but they'll shift around a little bit. Like our gun season this past year opened a little bit later than it normally does, and that's just because it opens the Saturday before Thanksgiving, and because of how the calendar fell, it just happened to be later this year. So there's going to be some changes around that. One thing that was interesting was multiple members of the Conservation Advisory Board, they address the meeting before people go up there and start talking. Multiple of them actually got up there and reported, one, really good deer seasons, but really good turkey numbers this past season. They're like, people are very excited about turkey season, seeing big fall flocks, like really optimistic. So that was good to hear. That was really good to hear heading into turkey season here. I mean, there was some saltwater stuff. If you're a saltwater guy, it was this is just interesting to me that snook are moving up into the like coastal area of Alabama. So they were talking about putting a size limit on snook and designating them as a game fish in Alabama. So that was interesting. I'm sure Daniel Williams will find that interesting. He's a big saltwater guy. Let's see. There's a guy asking for dove season to be pushed back. There are several duck hunters there in regards to Swan Creek Wildlife Management Area. Swan Creek Management Area here in Alabama, it's a waterfowl management area, and it used to be you could put in for a lottery draw, and if you drew a blind, you could go and put like a floating blind out there, and that was your blind all season that no one else could hunt it, and so you drew these spots, but you could still go in and hunt it. Like walk in, but you just couldn't hunt within like 150 yards of those blinds. Well, they changed it, I think it was last year, where now it's like 100% lottery draw. So you can't just walk in and hunt it, or if you do, they'll do draws at like 4 a.m. at the gate. And shout out to the Swan Creek hunters who were pissed off about that because they showed up. There were several of them there who made respectful and very great cases of why the new system is terrible. One guy got up there, he's like, man, I've been hunting Swan Creek for 45 years, and, I was able to hunt it one time this year. He's like, duck season is this many days, and with the new regulations, it's like 60 days of duck season, and with the new regulations, you only get like 18 days to hunt, and you have to draw. And so they're like, you just completely took away our entire duck season, basically. So they made great cases. So kudos to those guys for going and making their case respectfully. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. But I just wanted to bring them up because they're a good example of if you got a problem with something, you better show up and tell them.
We got to talk about some dog hunters.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there were several people there who were wanting to abolish baiting, by the way. And the Conservation Advisory Board here in Alabama was sure they addressed the whole thing. They're like, hey, guys, that's not us. That's a legislative issue. You need to take that up with your state congressmen and representatives because the Conservation Advisory Board, the baiting law in Alabama was passed by the, I guess, state Congress. It was not a Conservation Advisory Board or DCNR thing. So they have no power to get rid of it either because they're not the ones that put it there. So that was interesting. Only one person got up to talk about turkeys. It was a girl, and she got up there to suggest lowering the bag limit of turkeys down to 2 from 4 in Alabama. She made a great case. She was really well spoken. I disagree with her, but she made a great case about it. That's the only person that brought up anything about turkeys. And then, there was several guys there actually from South Alabama who were asking to start deer season on November 1st in South Alabama and let it run through the end of February. So start bow season November 1st.
Yeah.
And then let the gun season run through February 28th.
That's great because I was talking to some South Alabama guys about that because I feel so bad for those dudes because when the season ends February 10th, their bucks are still running.
Yep.
Daylighting, like great activity. Like it's complete opposite of most states where like by the time your season ends, it's late season, like bucks starting to batter back up. It is not like that in South Alabama, and I always felt bad for those guys. So I'm glad they brought that up at that event.
There was one guy who's like, there's bucks chasing on my property right now in March. They're still chasing out there. which is I believe it. I mean, it like we actually had a listener the other day send us in a picture of a scrape that was opened up on his property.
Yeah,
So I mean, yeah, that happened. So I think that's overdue. That was good. That it was actually several people who brought that up. I think it was 3 or 4. Which, from what we hear, if you want to get the attention of these cab members, there needs to be 3 or 4 people there bringing up the same thing over and over again. And again, do it respectfully. Which brings me to the dog hunter question. There was a couple guys, private landowners in particular, who got up there, and there was like 5 of them in a row. The first guy was mad, dude. I mean, red-faced. I mean, screaming at the board, literally screaming at him. It was awkward. And the moderator up on stage, he's like, sir, that's why we have microphones. They amplify your voice. It was pretty, but he was mad that dogs had been running across his private property. And man, it was like 5 different guys got up there about the dog hunting thing. And then Lonnie Miller from the Dog Hunters Association was up next. I think he goes to all of these.
Yeah.
And Lonnie, I was like, watching that, I was like, good grief, man. Like, these guys are, first of all, they're organized, and all the landowners had very legitimate complaints about it. The first guy, like, he was a little hot, I'm not gonna lie, probably not the best approach. All the other guys were very respectful, and they're like, guys, I don't hate dog hunters, I don't hate dog hunting, but like, this has got to change. It's becoming a real problem. Something bad's gonna happen. One of the guys had been bit by a dog on his property. So, when the Dog Hunter Association got up there, Lonnie Miller, he made a really good case following up all those guys, where he got up there, he's like, we don't want problems with anybody. If you just close the dog hunting in a county, it doesn't fix the problem, it just moves it to somewhere else, because you've got good dog hunters and you got bad dog hunters. Mm-hmm. And that's the case that Lonnie made. And basically, in a nutshell, his case is just punish the guys who are doing things. Like, if you make it to where you can write tickets for those dogs getting on somebody else's land, and really bring the hammer down on those guys, because there are dog hunters out there that are just belligerent a-holes, to put it plainly, who are like, my dog can't read property lines. It's like, yeah, but that dog is your responsibility. And we have technology now, and if you want to do that, like, you need to control your dog, or you're just going to lose it outright. So it's a really sticky subject, but it's like, man, the reality is like, if you want to keep doing it, you gotta take care of your dogs. That's all there is to it. And Lonnie made a really good case for that, I think, where to me that it seems like the common sense solution, where he was talking about the hunts they do in South Alabama, which I've heard about from multiple people, where they're turning out 100 dogs on like 16,000 acres, and they're getting 0 complaints about it, because their dogs are, collar broke or whistle broke, where they can watch the dog on the GPS collar, and if they're getting close to a property line, they can tone that dog, they can hit a whistle, they can shock the dog if they need to call them back to get them off that property line. And so it'll be interesting to see where that goes. That's the first time I've ever witnessed like that argument in person. And I can see why it is very annoying and tiresome for people like Chuck Sykes, the director, and all those other people that work in Montgomery, because they have to deal with this banter back and forth. Mm-hmm. And no matter what they do, people are going to be really upset about it. I don't know. I know dog hunters. I know some good dog hunters, so I got a soft spot for them. I've never dog hunted. I would like to at some point, but I'm not super attached to it or anything. I just hate to see like a tradition like that go away, And especially if there's guys who have figured out how to do it legally and respectfully, they should be allowed to do that, in my opinion. But to that point, the guys who are not doing it legally and respectfully, you should absolutely bring the hammer down on them and like make an example of them, in my opinion. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. But, man, it was like a big point of contention. I mean, basically the last half of the meeting was just dog hunting.
Yeah. Last year when I was there, I didn't make it this time. I'll explain why for all the listeners out there. But last year, Lonnie was there, and there was nobody else. There was nobody complaining about dog hunters. Last year they had changed a couple different regulations that previous season, and he was real happy with it. His guys were real happy with it. Everything seemed to be fine, very little conflict. And then it just went off the rails this year, is what it sounds like.
Well, the guy in particular who was really, really upset, who yelled at him, it sounded like he had been coming to those cab meetings for a while. and he'd been to a bunch of them, and like he ended it like his time was up. They were like, time, you know, like on the microphone, and he was like, do something. I mean, screaming at him. So I mean, they were, like I said, they were all from one specific area. So I don't know if they all knew each other or what, but they were all from one area and they all had problems. And it's an area where even the dog hunters I know talk about that area being really bad. Like those guys up there are bad news, and they don't do a good job with their dogs. Frankly, they are letting their dogs run across private land on purpose, and they don't care. And so I'm like, you should take those guys and make an example out of them, in my opinion. So, anyways, we'll see what happens with that. I'm sure that everyone's, you know, can be angry.
Yeah.
One way or another.
Well, yeah. I mean, you talk about dog hunting, gets people real fired up one way or the other. Most time, at least the common thing is like anti-dog hunting. But yeah, again, I've never done it. Like you said, like, be interested to do it, you know, once at some point and just kind of experience it from guys who do a really good job on it and handle their dogs, run GPS collars, really paying attention to that kind of stuff. And also run on bigger properties where you're trying to set yourself up where you don't have as many conflicts. But also, the academy actually sounds smaller this year than it was last year. Last year, I think there's 80-ish people there.
There definitely wasn't 80 people
like
there.
in the crowd. Outside of like law enforcement, I mean, there were so many game works there, game work trucks. I mean, they took up half the parking lot last year. But that's why I'm very interested about the next one in Troy, which again, small populated area. Be interesting to see the turnout. But anyway, I was able to be there. I was helping my granddad out. He had an antique lure show in Gunnersville, Alabama. I was helping him out with. Been doing that for like 3 or 4 years, and just so happened to land on the same time. I was like, man, I don't know if I can drive for 3.5 hours back in time to be able to be there. So ended up not making it. But it is still good to kind of, you know, get to these events and also, you know, get some buddies together. Again, the Troy one's going to be tough probably to get like a ton of listeners to just because of where it's located at. But again, we're going to try to go to that one on May 10th. But outside of that, the next ones that they do next year, whether it's in somewhere in Birmingham, Huntsville, Montgomery, hopefully we can find out about with enough time, talk about a lot more on the podcast, and try to again get a lot more of all of us there, you know, listeners and viewers of the podcast, and you know, kind of, you know, let some voices be heard. Because, you know, I had some guys last year in the Birmingham area, they couldn't make it down to Montgomery this time, but they had a lot of interesting thoughts, interesting questions and concerns. And again, it's like the perfect event to be able to do that stuff at. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things that, like, if you intentionally don't go, but then you complain about certain stuff, it's like, God,
Yeah.
need to be there, man, or have somebody there kind of speak on your behalf.
Yeah, and there were actually several people that brought that up. They're like, hey, I'm speaking for 24 hunters in so-and-so county. I'm speaking for this many people over here. So you can do that. And also the cab members and the state agency guys, they're all walking around afterwards. You can go up and talk to them. You know, go find your representative in your district. I said hey to Chuck, and I didn't talk to any of them afterwards. I was talking to other folks. But the last thing that they did was they did vote in favor of an adjustment of costs for all licenses and fees for 2025 and 2026. And basically, it sounded like they're trying to increase license costs.
How much?
With inflation. They didn't say. It sounded like it was just an approval to increase the cost. They didn't say. I don't think they've decided what they're increasing it to yet. But yeah, that was everybody raised their hand. I was like, golly, guys.
So that's why I got my lifetime license, but I still got to purchase my WMA license every year.
Yeah.
So, which is unfortunate. I wish they could have wrapped that into the lifetime license, but
yeah, so licenses going up this year, boys and girls. Hate to tell you.
It's coming a game of money.
Yep. So May 10th in Troy. Be there, be square.
Yep. Awesome. Other than that, you got anything else?
What'd you think of Preston's episode?
Oh yeah. This
past Monday.
Preston's awesome. I mean, it was so we kind of talked about this a little bit in the beginning of the episode, but we originally went to do this podcast, and our old recorder system we had just did not save the file, so we lost the whole interview.
Yep.
So we were able to go back over to Preston, West Point, Mississippi, and redo it. And he is a character. He's funny. I love talking to those older guys who've been around a time or two. They have a lot of Southern Southernisms, as I've been told, different sayings. Like when he was talking about his buddy Redbeard, I forgot his real name, Bud or something. Put your legs twixt your leg. Put your head betwixt your legs.
No, your head twixt your legs, boy.
I'm like, that's hilarious. But I mean, I love talking to guys like that because you see a side of what it used to be like that we're not familiar with. Like we know guys from that generation. Like you talk to them, but it's another thing where you actually have almost 2 hours sit down with them and tell stories and learn more about like what it was like because so much has changed. It kind of reminds me of when I interviewed Bobby Worthington in his episodes that came out this past fall, where he was talking about he never met someone who didn't hunt until he went to college. And he thought the guy was a communist. Yeah, he said, I thought he was a communist. and it's just like the culture of what it was like back in the Deep South back then. It's so different now.
Yeah, that was fun. I put it in our newsletter. We had a newsletter go out here recently that this turkey season we're trying to interview more guys like Preston. Again, old timers, but also focusing more on a storytelling aspect and kind of focusing on their upbringing. And one reason for that is, one, we want to preserve that. You know, a lot of those guys, they're getting on up there. They're not going to be around forever. So we want to preserve that. And two, a lot of their wisdom kind of comes out through those stories. And so I think it's something that can appeal to everybody, whether you hunt deer or turkeys or whatever. And, you know, I think there's a lot of stuff in Preston's episode that even a deer hunter could, you know, pick up on and really enjoy. But that's what we're trying to do throughout this spring and really throughout this year is more of that. So far, the response to it's been phenomenal. So appreciate you guys sharing it, watching it. If you enjoy it, if you're listening this far into the podcast, you're probably one of our more dedicated listeners. So we appreciate you. And I'm going to ask you for a favor. Take those episodes that you like and text them to a buddy, put them on social media, do whatever you got to do. Just share them, get the word out, because it's going to help us grow even more and keep pushing this thing to the next level. So we're...
Because the more we... Listen, guys, this is something kind of reiterate what you're talking about. The more we can grow the show, the more things we're capable of doing for you guys from a content standpoint, which is going to make it better and better. Kind of like to be able to afford all this new equipment and test run some things to make the show flow better and also be able to allow us to travel and get these guys on, because we're going to them. We're done of the way of Zoom meetings and phone call interviews and all that.
No more Zoom meetings unless we absolutely have to. No more Zoom, no more Google calls, no more phone calls. Like, we're going to people.
Yeah. So again, if y'all share the episodes with buddies or on social media, it really does help the show. We really do appreciate that. And also, again, throwing back to, leave us reviews, whether it's on Spotify or iHeartRadio. Actually, not iHeartRadio. I don't know if you can leave reviews there. Probably can. But Apple Podcasts specifically. Again, those are super helpful. And we love getting those reviews and kind of seeing, what you're liking about the show, what you'd like to see in the future from the show, and so on. So it makes it super, super fun. And also, we really enjoy not only getting the listener success stories, which kind of going back to that earlier, if you're a guy like, was it Aaron from Michigan?
Yes.
If you're a guy...
I can't believe you got his name right.
Yeah, well, that was an easy one to remember. But if you're a guy like Aaron, where you use something from the podcast and it helps you have success, whether it's turkey hunting, deer hunting, whatever, write those in, submit those. We actually have a page on our website, thesouthernOutdoorsmen.com, for listener success stories. And we've been sharing a bunch of those right now in the off season. I say off season from deer season. And again, we'll continue to share those throughout the year until we're done publishing them for 2024, 2025's deer season. But it's really cool kind of seeing some of y'all's feedback, specifically in not only the Q&As, but listener success stories about what was impactful for you from guests, like whether it's specific guests or specific topics you've heard on the podcast or seen on the podcast. And that gets us even more excited about finding more some of these guys to kind of share with you all. So again, we've been doing this now for 8 years, and very excited for the next 8 years and what we can do, but definitely need some help from you guys to kind of continue to grow the podcast and allow us to try to get some of these guys on that y'all recommend, because y'all have been doing a really good job lately recommending some great podcast guests or potential podcast guests. Yep. So we really appreciate y'all doing that.
Yeah, we got a good response. We put the request out for Florida people last week. We got a whole bunch of requests in, so hopefully we'll make some of those happen. If we do, we'll follow up on the merch thing, where if we get to interview one of those guys that y'all wrote in, we will send you a merch packet. So appreciate everyone who did that. I'm going to do another one of those right now in a place where we just don't know that many people, frankly. if anybody out there knows someone who would be a good guest in East Texas, that would be awesome. Because I don't know if we know like hardly anybody in East Texas as far as guests go.
Yeah.
Shout out to Seth Johnson, East Texas. But other than him, man, I don't really know a ton of people over there. So if you got guest recommendations over there, write them in.
East Texas, West Louisiana.
Yep.
That kind of area. Yeah, write those in. That'd be fantastic because we're trying to plan out right now, especially after turkey season, certain road trips we're going to do in order to interview these guys. So over the next few weeks, if someone comes up that you think of, write those in. Specifically, send us an email at info@thesouthernoutdoorsman.com and just put in the subject line, podcast guest recommendation.
Yes.
And
That would be so helpful.
any information you can give us, first off, what state are they in? And if you happen to have a contact information for them, or if you know that they're on social media, let us know and we'll try to get a hold of them and see if it's, first off, if they're worth getting on the podcast, and also try and line up a schedule for them so we can get them on the show, especially this summer.
Yeah, 100%. Like we're trying to go a little bit of everywhere just to give y'all an idea. We mentioned it before, but I mean, listen, like pretty much all the states in the Southeast. Anywhere in the Southeast, we're going to try to go to all of them this summer and fall doing interviews. So, man, anywhere y'all got a recommendation, let us know.
Yep.
Let us know.
So awesome. Well, other than that, you got anything else?
Nope, that's all I got.
All right, cool. Well, appreciate everybody watching and listening to the podcast. So again, appreciate y'all's support. Appreciate also everybody's been buying apparel. We got one of our Southern Outdoorsman hats on right now. Again, y'all are huge supporters, and we've got some really cool apparel that we're working on right now that I think y'all are really going to like a little bit later on this year. So make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter, The Woodsman Wire. Again, you can do that going over to our website, again, thesouthernoutdoorsman.com. Subscribe to that. One place you can get a lot of information from us when we send out those email blasts to all you guys. So appreciate y'all watching the podcast. Thank y'all for listening to it, and we'll catch you back here in the next episode from the Southern Outdoorsman. And remember, guys, y'all stay Southern.